Welcome back to another edition of Post Media's Ottawa Senators panel. I'm with Ken Warren, with Bruce Garriock, and special guest star this week, Dean Brown, the voice of the Ottawa Senators, joins us. Guys, always news with this team. The latest is Vitaly Abramov is here, Drake Batherson and Philip Schlappick are no longer here. Dean, your immediate reaction to these moves, didn't take the Senators long to juggle the lineup here.
Yeah, I think with Drake Batherson, he did not have a great camp and he struggled in the preseason, and I think he was given some rope because of the strong season in the end that he had last year. But, there just weren't enough signs, I think, for them to keep him here. And I think in the case of Philip Schlappick, being the extra forward, they just didn't see a time when he was going to play regularly, and so as a young player, probably good to send him back. But to be honest with you, for me, you guys, I'm sure you get the same questions. I was asked if I was surprised, changes after just 2 games. And my answer, to be honest with you, is no. Because I think what we all should get used to is that I think this roster over the course of this year is going to be very fluid. Yeah. I think there's going to be movement back and forth all the time, and that just because one of the kids gets sent back doesn't mean that he's failed. It's just this is part of the progression. I think we all go back to one of the things that even Guy Boucher said last year, which was, I think, still very poignant, that the progression of a player is not a straight line. Sometimes you progress, then you take a little step back, then you progress. And so I think for those reasons, and because Ottawa has so many players like that in that situation, I think you're going to see tons of back and forth all year long.
I certainly feel, Ken, certainly with Batherson, they had to stop trying to force it. He had a difficult training camp. They gave him a lot of rope. He wasn't able to reach up and grab the job. I look at the case of Abramov. He was good from the start of camp. He was good during the rookie tournament. And then he got injured, Kenny, and I think that hurt his standing a bit. They said he worked hard down in Belleville. Give him the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think you guys said it. Batherson was rewarded for last year. Let's face it. I don't know what's going on with him, whether it was the extra weight. Maybe it's slowing him down. Maybe it's his head. We saw it the other night against the Rangers, the 2-0 break, and he just froze, I think, a little bit, passed the puck off. Abramov, I agree. You're rewarding a guy for his camp. I have a little bit of an issue with Philip Schlappick because why was he here if he's not going to get a shot at the beginning of the year? You got the Mikhail Bodker problem, let's face it, that's a problem. You got an extra contract, and if the guy's going to be here, he's playing, at some point they're going to have to deal with that.
I think that maybe he might have been here for exactly what you were talking about in the case of Bodker. Bodker came in late in camp and started playing games, but a veteran player coming off a hip flexor injury, he's a question mark. So I kind of believe that Schlappick probably was here because they were unsure if Bodker was going to be able to play or if he's going to, And so I think that was probably the early season cushion they needed. But, they got a couple of home games coming up here, and so they can, have a guy down in Belleville. If they need somebody, he's 2 hours away. But I think it is probably best for Schlappick. If he's not going to play, or if they're not going to play him, then don't be here. A guy like that needs to play.
Okay, now let's talk quickly here. Tied into what happened in the first 2 games, the Senators, they look like a team that's rebuilding, and I think especially after Toronto's a loaded lineup. New York not so much, but New York did roll on them a little bit. And DJ Smith was I thought, very strong in his words post-game about, hey, we got outworked, we can't get outworked, and sending some messages to some people. It's early, but I guess this is how he has to try to put a stamp on this team.
Well, exactly, and I think what's happened here is, the Senators were good at various points in the game for short stretches. And I think one of the things they've talked about, and people talk about it all the time, Dean, is, well, they got to be good for 60 minutes. Well, the way this team is right now, they can't afford to have setbacks, because what happens when they have setbacks and make mistakes, Dean? It ends up in their net. And one of the things that DJ Smith has insisted on since he got here from day one is that if you don't work hard, you're not going to play. So he's got to stay on that message.
Yeah, there's no question, because the only thing that he has that can equalize things game in, game out is effort. There's, this team is just too inexperienced to be able to compete with a lot of teams, if not most teams in the NHL. And so, the only thing that beats a high-skilled team is superior effort. And so, he's drumming it into his team because it really is true. The chances of them winning games on any given night is almost completely connected to their work ethic because, you look at this team right now, not so much average age, because sometimes that gets skewed. Ottawa's got 2 38-year-olds in the lineup, so that makes this team's average age higher than it really is. They dress 20 players a night. They've got, start of the year, they had their first game, they had 10 players on the roster that have played fewer than 150 NHL games. This team has such low experience levels, and we all knew, what a rebuild looks like. We all knew it's inexperienced. But that doesn't negate the fact you still got to play games and try and win them.
Well, now this is what's interesting, because you talk about the young guys, and you got a guy like Colin White. They're trying to force him a little bit into a number one role, playing with Brady Tkachuk, who has been very good in the first 2 games. White, I think, like you talked about, you might see a little bit of this. That's normal for a guy that age. But that's where you get into these guys they brought in, Tyler Ennis, Anisimov, Connor Brown. You're going to have to get some stuff out of these guys. And if they're, it's like pulling teeth sometimes, because are they capable of being first-line, second-line players? Fans are going to have to get used to some long nights, because these guys might be forced into positions they've never had before.
But it's interesting you mention those names, because it's incumbent upon those guys. It's incumbent upon Connor Brown. He wasn't given that role in Toronto. They're giving him that opportunity here. They liked Anisimov because he can be an offensive player. He's got a great opportunity to be an offensive player here. We often talk about the veteran players, and we talk about DeMello and Tierney. Well, how old are DeMello and Tierney? Like, they're not
24.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yet they're veteran players on this team, and that's where I think Dean makes the point. But those guys who are being thrust into those roles, certainly those veteran players, they have to perform up to that standard if this team is going to have success.
Well, we talk about that, and those guys thrust in those positions. And this maybe brings us around to the Logan Brown, the mild controversy of his agent saying that this guy deserves to be in here. Do you want to expose, how many of the young guys do you want to expose to this environment? Let's face it, it's going to be a long year. It's going to be a lot of long nights. Where's the line between pushing the young prospects maybe a little bit? We talked about some of them. And maybe like tempering them a little bit by allowing them to play in the AHL a bit longer.
Well, Andy Scott is a very good agent, and his job is to advocate for his client, and that's what he was doing. But you can't get around the fact that over the last 3 years, Logan Brown, through injury, has missed, about 100 games. And the other thing you can't get around, that in hockey and in every professional sport, if you want a job, you have to take someone else's. Someone else has to lose their job for you to get a job. And if you ask people honestly, and it's nothing against Logan Brown, he's a young player, but which of the Ottawa centers was he better than?
Right.
And the answer was he wasn't better than any of the 4 centers. But that doesn't mean, I don't know about you guys, but I still think that he's going to be here this year sometime. And I still think that down the road, he's probably going to be Ottawa's number 1 center for the next 15 years. He's got the highest skill level of any center they have in the organization. He has the best vision of any center they have in the organization. I'm just not sure he's ready yet to be that guy. And going back to my original point, the reality is, out of training camp, he didn't beat out any center for a job at the NHL level. That's so no one ever gets hurt by playing in the AHL, even if he might not be enjoying it right now and feeling like maybe he didn't get a great chance. But I'm not sure, how many chances you get, and he has missed a lot of games. He's had a lot to recover in his career.
And the misperception to me, Kenny, about those statements was that people thought, well, because Andy Scott spoke out, Pierre Dorion is going to bury Logan Brown because there's not a chance they're going to bury Logan Brown because of those comments. Logan Brown's going to be called up. At someday, I think he's probably going to be the number 1 center for this team. I think they just don't want to force it. And Logan Brown came into camp. He had to beat out the 4 guys, and he didn't. Now, you could say, well, just keep him here anyway. But he didn't beat out those 4 guys, so that's why he's in the minors. But I have no doubt in my mind that in a very short period of time on this panel, we'll be talking about Logan Brown, the player, here in Ottawa.
An 0-2 start, guys. Senators, it's been. I think a lot of people might have had crazy notions that maybe they can surprise. It's going to be a long year. Let's face it. And who's coming in later this week? Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues, followed by the Tampa Bay Lightning, who certainly have a lot to prove. Thanks, guys, for coming in. That wraps up another edition of Post Media's Ottawa Senators panel. Thanks for tuning in.